and it's going to be a Frank Capra tier list. I'm going to try to go through here a little quick. And I included I think I included all the movies of Capra's that I've seen. If I didn't, I'll feel like a real joker. But here they mostly are. I think Frank Capra's he's one of my favorite filmmakers. I think he's one of the most important filmmakers of all time because he's like an architect in a large way. I think that he basically invented what we think of when we think of America at its most idealized or romantic. I think that we are living in Frank Capra's America, which means we are living in a cinematic ideal of America. We're living in an America that was invented by a director. And also, I just wanna. This book should be a required reading of all cinephiles. Frank Capra's autobiography, the name above the title. The way this man writes about cinema is beautiful. I think that this is the coolest fucking book about films I've ever read. If you're at all a fan of Frank Capra, read his autobiography. If you're a cinephile and a serious one, a requirement is to read the name above the title. That's brilliant. To hear him talk about film is insane. But yeah, I think that Frank Capra did something that no other director has been able to do. I think you can argue that he made propaganda. Well, he did actually make propaganda movies. I have one of his propaganda films on this list. You can argue that, sure, but all films are propaganda in some sort of way. They could be sexual propaganda. They're all trying to uh, convince you of something. If it's an attraction or an ideology. It's part of cinema's power. It's whatever. And I think that his ideation of America is a remarkably healthy one. I don't think it's problematic really at all. I think it's insane that Frank Capra, the fucking guy who made Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and shit, was actually held under suspicion by like McCarthy House Un-American Activities. He was suspected of being a fucking traitor. And it's like Frank Capra, of all people. That's how I know the McCarthy people were so fucking paranoid it was a joke. Anyway, Pocket Full of Miracles is the very first one here. Might have like I can hardly see these titles, Zach. Pocket Full of Miracles is the very first one. It's a B tier movie. It's actually a remake of Lady for a Day, which is a C tier movie. I think it's delightful. I think that Pocket Full of Miracles, he remade his own film in color, and I think it's wonderful. It stars Glenn Ford, and he's great. I love him so much, actually, in that film. And I love him so much in general, like the Big Heat and stuff. Glenn Ford should have been on my greatest movie stars or whatever list. But yeah, he made his own film, a Cinderella story. He liked to make like uplifting films depicting the lower class, kind of conquering all odds. And I think what's so cool about Pocket Full of Miracles is that the person who is bringing all these like Glenn Ford is a gangster basically. like he's a character who lives in the gray area who is providing like a homeless woman with her Cinderella story. And it's a comedy though, right? Because he's doing it to try to pull off a scheme. But it's very good, and I think that Lady for a Day, that might have been the first time Capra understood like what kind of pictures he was making. Pictures that could actually change and influence people, because Capra completely understood the effect that cinema had on culture, that it could change them. Meet John Doe is an A-tier movie. Barbara Stanwyck and Gary Cooper. Barbara Stanwyck acted for Capra so many times. While Jean Arthur was Capra's favorite actress, I think that Barbara Stanwyck, that's where his eroticisms are. I think he says so in his fucking book. I think he was incredibly attracted to Barbara Stanwyck. And if you want to know about Capra's eroticisms, watch the way that he films Barbara Stanwyck in films like Meet John Doe and Bitter Tea of General Yen and stuff like that. And Gary Cooper returns to Capra after being in Mr. Deeds. And Meet John Doe, I think, is such a great film. Actually a confrontational film that goes to a couple dark places as well. And then here we have A Hole in the Head. That can go above Lady for a Day on the C tier. So it's Capra's first color film with starring Frank Sinatra and Carolyn Jones was a fox. She was in that, and she's the best part of that movie. There's not a whole lot to it, but I love seeing Capra's using color for the first time. I don't think he used it like twice for Pocketful of Miracles and A Hole in the Head, and I think he used colors in a very interesting way. And American Madness can go just behind it on the C tier. It's interesting. Cinephile book tier list. I could do that, actually. I could. I've read a lot of cool books on cinema. The fact that Capra was an immigrant is even more representative of the American dream. Yeah, if I didn't say that, I certainly meant to. I love that. And he loves that too. And like, at least according to him, that's the fun part of his autobiography, is that he might be an unreliable narrator because he wants to tell the best version, the most cinematic version of his life story. The way that he stumbled into making films is like, no, I can do it better. It's ridiculous. Frank Capra was fucking a genius, man. He makes me smile, like one of a kind. And oh my God, like, I am so jaded and cynical and misanthropic, especially when it comes to the current state of our nation. But if you put on a great Frank Capra movie, I'll believe in America again, which is insane. He gets me, dude. This is making me want to watch a lot of old movies, which I'm out of practice with. Yeah, I'm in the mood too for a lot of old movies. I try to keep up a healthy media diet. I try to keep a couple old movies in rotation, but I definitely want to go on a little bit of a classic movie binge for sure. Frank Capra is what Steven Spielberg wishes he was. Frank Capra is what so many people wishes they were. But Spielberg is just too idiotic to even come close. Like, Frank Capra, I think, had such a huge understanding of not only like human experience, but of the power of film. Because like, Capra understood that you could define a country and shape it through film. Spielberg is like, I can make a cool fucking dinosaur. So it's like they're comparable, but also not. And like, when Spielberg got serious with Saving Private Ryan, that was Capra would have been a lot more confrontational even than Spielberg. Or Capra just wouldn't have fucking done that, right? Capra was a genius. I love reading like I think he's John Cassavetes' favorite filmmaker. Cassavetes is certainly like a renegade indie filmmaker. I mean, he's the American independent filmmaker. He basically popularized American independent cinema. And John Cassavetes is like, I think Frank Capra is the greatest filmmaker ever. And even he said, like, I don't know if I love America or I love Frank Capra, but I feel like it's the same thing. And I think that's crazy to fucking say, man. Lost Horizon, our first S tier movie, is so good, so incredibly mysterious and enigmatic. That might be the closest to a Spielberg kind of picture, because he's less about creating the ethos of America than he is about really using cinema to explore some enduring mysteries. Right? It's about Shangri-La, and I think it's just fascinatingly filmed. It is so fucking good. He was also like a genius visual storyteller, and that's something Spielberg is not at all. State of the Union, low on the C tier. If you notice, Spencer Tracy wasn't on my tier list either. And I wasn't a huge Katharine Hepburn fan, if you remember that tier list too. Everyone seems to love those two, and I'm like, I don't really get it. But State of the Union is an okay Frank Capra movie. It's definitely not one of his best. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town is, oh my God, I love this movie. It sounds so cheesy, but if a cinephile is ever forgiven, it's when he gets to talk about Frank Capra movies. So it sounds cheesy. I get it. I get you. But I want to be a better, honest, sincere, and truthful person every time I watch Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. And my girl Jean Arthur is in there trying to just making the whole package come together. I think Mr. Deeds is a straight up masterpiece. Great job, Gary Cooper, Jean Arthur, and Frank Capra. It actually inspires me to live up to a higher standard, which is the Capra standard. It's a cinematic standard. That's what's so cool. Cinema's so powerful. People don't necessarily realize until we really get down to Frank Capra, and we're like, no. Everything you think about as like a certain American virtue, it's not like something that was written by the founding fathers or has been eternal or whatever. It was invented by a fucking Italian immigrant in 30s American cinema. Like, it was a cinematic invention, and maybe there's nothing more American than that. And that's the America I want to live in, man. Miracle Woman, end of the C tier. Nothing much to say about it. It's just interesting to watch him film Barbara Stanwyck because Frank Capra, his films weren't like sexless or anything. Like he had interesting ways of filming eroticism. Like look at what's going on with a character's hat. Like when in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, it's a very cool moment because he's obviously like attracted and aroused by her, and rather than like frame the two of them having a conversation, Capra tracks his hat as he fiddles with it and puts it like around his back and doesn't know exactly what to do with it. And that's kind of Freudian, being a hat and everything like that, being the head. And he's like moving it all around, like follow his hat. Like it's still erotic. There's still sex within it. But with Barbara Stanwyck, it's pretty explicit in the idea that like, oh, this director is positively obsessed with this woman. And it's interesting to see Capra feed into those more base urges that I think all directors, all healthy ones, kind of experiment with. You Can't Take It With You, S tier movie. I think that it's better than Mr. Deeds Goes to Washington. That's a phenomenal film that celebrates the misfit completely. You know what? Tim Burton is a lot more similar to Frank Capra than Spielberg because a lot of Capra's heroes were nonconformists, considering that like the world that his heroes kind of enter into is a jaded and kind of puzzling one, right? It's like a confrontational one, a mean one. So his characters are nonconformists and kind of unique little misfits, like with their own idiosyncrasies and stuff like that. And I think You Can't Take It With You is a great example of that. I love that family. Jean Arthur is great in that too. Jean Arthur makes me clap my hands like a maniac clown. I love her so much, and she's great in You Can't Take It With You. It reminds me of a Burton-esque kind of picture in the sense that it champions the misfits. I love it so much. Love it. ML, I really love that you do these live chats. Thank you, and everyone who's here. You took the words out of my mouth. Thank you, everybody who's here for these live chats. This is awesome. Yeah, I love doing these. It's fun to actually interact with you guys in a more like one-on-one kind of way. It's fun. Cinephiles can be pretty insular. I don't want to be too insular. I like these live chats. And I like that you come to them, ML. Thank you for coming. We need a video where you talk about King Vidor. Brilliant, brilliant director. He seems to be a filmmaker you really like a lot. Yeah, I adore him. I'm really into his stuff right now. Just saw The Wedding Night and it broke me. King Vidor is perfect, all right? King Vidor is excellent. I could do like a King Vidor ranking maybe next time. Let me rewatch The Wedding Night and get back to you on that one. I do love it, though. We were just talking about Gary Cooper. I need to rewatch that, Jack. I almost forgot about it. When I think of Vidor, I think of his silent masterworks first and foremost to like show people and big parade in the crowd. He's intensely good. He's intensely good. I love him. That's a really underrated filmmaker. And he's only underrated because, you know, Criterion hasn't fucking touched him, right? Like I hate that part of cinephile culture. You know, like people stick to a specific like watch like reading selection basically. King Vidor is one of the very best. For some reason his films haven't received like great treatments, even though like Criterion should get their hands on them, because I can hardly find a copy of Show People or The Crowd, for instance. You know, like those films actually need your help, man. Criterion, get on that. Give my boy a bump so that I can do a ranking on him and people might actually watch. It Happened One Night, I think, is fabulous. S tier movie, baby. So fucking great. Like the quintessential, one of the most perfect screwball comedies. I think that Easy Living is also one of the most perfect screwball comedies. It's up in the air between those two. 1937's Easy Living, directed by Mitchell Leisen, and It Happened One Night. Capra, Gable, Colbert. Oh my god, it's hilarious. It's super charming and romantic, and there's something infectious about the movie in a really good way. I feel really good about that movie. I think it's awesome. The walls of Jericho come tumbling down. Bitter Tea of General Yen is the only one I'll put in the D tier. I still think it is. I still think it's good. I guess I don't think it's good. I think that there are interesting ways that the movie's filmed. I think that we should recognize when Capra is guilty of being fucked up, though, because he committed yellowface in that movie. Um, I remember reading in his autobiography. I think he might have tried to hire an Asian actor for General Yen, but like I don't know how much effort he really put into it, and then settled for a white actor playing the role. But it's interesting to watch to see him film Barbara Stanwyck again. That's really cool. And it's also like the only time that he tried to win an Oscar. These Oscar things started happening, and Capra was like, "I fucking want one. I'll make the bitter tea of General Yen, and I'll do all these artistic things with it." And he got totally snubbed. So he's like, "Never again will I do that." And then he just started winning nonstop and started changing the world. The bitter tea of General Yen is a failure because of A, the fucked upness of Yellowface, and B, the fact that it was Capra like trying to make like an award bait movie and completely failing. But I do think it is interesting to see him film Barbara Stanwyck again. And I mean, some of the artistic stuff he does in the film is contrived. He calls it artistic. I just call it composition. Some of it is contrived, but it still looks pretty good. Arsenic and Old Lace is an A-tier movie. You know, that movie is completely fucking insane. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's really, really, really funny. Peter Lorre, Cary Grant, so good. You're seriously making me want to watch some Capra, and I don't normally give him a second thought. That means you're doing something right here. That's right. Even if his films suck, props to your enthusiasm. Thanks for the props. And I see your continuation. I like that you did that. What type of movies do you cry the most for some reason? The movies that get me are mostly comedic movies that are relatable with a little drama mixed in. A musical can really get me. Like, put together my Cabaret video the other day, and I was remembering just how shook I was from the film. Like, Liza Minnelli can make me weep in that movie. That movie makes me cry a lot. Honestly, I guess it's like the melodrama involved with musicals. So melodrama make me cry a lot. A lot of these teen shows that I cover, you know, like Dawson's Creek and like One Tree Hill and stuff, like I'll cry. I'll cry. Melodrama, I think, is perfect cinematically or done in television. I think it's perfect. And I think that if you apply music to drama, you make it melodramatic. That's just how it works. Just how the function works. Melodrama makes me cry, but really well done melodrama. Like, I hope that answers your question. All right, Prelude to War, guys. Gonna go in the B tier. It's a propaganda film. He was actually commissioned. He was so good at making. Like, it's the only actual propaganda. He made a whole series of them for the army. Propaganda films for World War II. And Prelude to War, I think, is a really well put together propaganda movie. And I think it's insane that he made it, and I think it's brilliant that the army recognized, like, hey, this guy literally invented the country we live in. He invented it like 5 years ago. We need to get him to make a propaganda movie. It's wild. It's wild. It's really well done, though. It's a really well done series. Totally did its job. It's a Wonderful Life goes on the S tier. But at the very end, I think that Capra had a lot of masterpieces, and I think It's a Wonderful Life is a masterpiece. I do think it's his most overrated masterpiece, but a masterpiece nonetheless. So it's almost like fruitless even involving that distinction in here. But I love that Capra is such a populist, right? He never asked what his favorite film was. He'd be like, "Oh, It's a Wonderful Life," because that's the one that all the people say, and I believe the people. If the people say that it's bad, then it's bad. Or if it's great, it's great. If it's my best, it's my best. And he's like, the people have spoken. He's such a fucking populist, like to the death. I think It's a Wonderful Life is so fascinating because it speaks to access determines masterpieces. Access determines tradition, right? Because It's a Wonderful Life was like in the same company that he made the company, like Liberty Pictures or something, and they closed down, and then the rights to It's a Wonderful Life were like basically free, and PBS and public broadcasting stations got It's a Wonderful Life and would play it like every Christmas. And it's not necessarily that it's Capra's best film, because I certainly don't think it is, but I think it is very masterful in its own way. But the coolest thing about it is, like, so many people had access to that movie, like through public broadcasting channels, because the rights were like free, that it became tradition, like over time. Access determines what is a masterpiece. Access determines tradition in a very large way. Media access determines American tradition is a fascinating concept to think about, right? The more access people have to art, like that's really what determines what is considered to be works of art. And I think It's a Wonderful Life is a great example of that. We need to have more people have access to an even larger selection of great films. But It's a Wonderful Life is where it's at today because of access to it, not because it was immediately liked upon its release, not because it truly is Capra's greatest, because while it is a Frank Capra masterpiece, we do some great things in there. Donna Reed is fine as fuck, and it's really fun to watch. It pales in comparison to something like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which has become my favorite Frank Capra movie. I talked about it a little bit earlier. Clarissa Saunders is the true hero of that film. I find her to be the most interesting heroine in all of films. She's the one who has an arc. Clarissa Saunders is me. Clarissa Saunders is you. Clarissa Saunders is Jean Arthur, the ultimate nonconformist. She's the one who has an arc. Mr. Smith does not. Mr. Smith just goes to Washington. Clarissa Saunders lives in Washington in the pit of vipers, and she starts off cynical and becomes the protector of the inner child of America, which is exemplified and amplified by Jimmy Stewart's Mr. Smith. She becomes a protector of that inner child. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, I think, is complicated, sophisticated, and beautiful, with maybe Jean Arthur's greatest performance. And Clarissa Saunders, I think, is one of the greatest film characters of all time. And I think it's wonderfully photographed and composed and conceived. And we get great, like, Edward Arnold performances. Edward Arnold is a great, oh my God, look him up. He was in so many great films, but you'll never read about Edward Arnold. He was in Easy Living and Mr. Smith and You Can't Take It With You. He was so fucking great. Well, he kind of did. He made that one guy do it. I covered like every film that we've talked about in this tier ranking. I have covered in a video, and yeah, I had to talk about this once. Nils Aster is his name. They had him do it. He's kind of guilty. He's certainly complicit. You know, you gotta call it. You gotta call it when you see it. I gotta be fair here. But I covered every movie that we just talked about. Every movie we just talked about has their own video. And if you want to see me talk about that some more, check out my Bitter Tea of General Yen video. Who do you think is the best kid or teen actor to have an adult career? If River Phoenix kept it going, that would be my answer. As basic as it is, It's a Wonderful Life is my favorite film. That's fucking rad, dude. Can't connect to a film more than I do this one. I like that. And I didn't mean to criticize it in that sort of way for you. I love that it's your favorite film. Was it like a tradition within your family? Was it like, were you shown it a lot as a kid, or were you a latecomer to it? I was a latecomer to it. I'm also Jewish, right? So I didn't really grow up with a lot of Christmas traditions that a lot of Gentiles and non-Jews do. So it took me a while to see It's a Wonderful Life. Like it would have been one of the last Capra pictures I ever saw. But I still definitely do enjoy it. My God, I have a huge crush on Donna Reed. Not even playing with you on that. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington as probably Jimmy Stewart's best performance. You speak the truth. Fuck yeah. Also, do you think Jimmy was better used by Capra? Capra all day. I find films like Rear Window to be infuriatingly annoying. Vertigo. Oh my God, you might not know it, Ruben, but I hate the movie Vertigo so much. I hate it. I think it's possibly the most overrated movie in film history. I like that I understand what you're saying so well now, Coppola. You're checking in. I know what you mean. Thank you for checking in, Coppola. Let me go full screen for you for this Capra tier. And I'm glad that I'm getting some of you excited about maybe watching a Capra movie. There, you can make no better decision as a cinephile than to watch a Capra film. I mean, this is such a baller list of S-tier movies, man. This is so good. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It Happened One Night. You Can't Take It With You. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Lost Horizon. And It's a Wonderful Life. And Meet John Doe was almost on the S-tier. You better believe it. Catch Me Tomorrow, and it might also be on there. Just fine. It's a Wonderful Life. I think he's such a talented filmmaker. The only real dud to me is The Bitter Tea of General Yen. The rest are definitely worth watching, and it's fascinating to see him grow and change as not only an artist, but as an architect of literally everything we think of when we think of America at its most, right? At its most ideal, at its most virtuous. You were a latecomer to It's a Wonderful Life, and it only became my favorite after I experienced a bit more of life as a young adult. That's fascinating. I mean, it is a really, like, I guess, introspectively it's a retrospective of his life, right? And kind of got a bit of Dickens to it. It might be his most Dickensian movie, right? George becomes more relatable each year I see it, and the tears become more frequent. Fuck yeah, let the tears go. All cinephiles gotta cry. I like that. Maybe it'll grow with me too. I'm a relative newcomer to It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah, Jack, if it's on the S tier, it is not. I think it's a masterpiece. It's not a criticism. It's at the end of the S tier. It doesn't matter. A lesser masterpiece is still a fucking masterpiece. So don't worry about that. The only ones I can recall having seen are Shangri-La and Wonderful Life. What should I watch next? Did you like either of those? Did you like either of those though? Let me know if you liked either of those, and then I'll tell you which one you should watch. Because you watched two films from two different kinds of interests of Capra. If you liked It's a Wonderful Life, I would recommend You Can't Take It With You, most likely. If you haven't seen my favorite, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, I'd watch that one, or watch You Can't Take It With You. Watch one of those two. And I hope you do. And let me know what you think of them. I'm shocked by how many Hitchcock movies I don't like. There's more and more of us every day, all right? We can overturn this Hitchcock supremacy. We can overturn it. I'm not too impressed by him, to be perfectly honest. I've said it before. I think that his pupils, Brian De Palma and Roman Polanski, do it 10 times better, and we don't even need Hitchcock anymore. Let me get rid of this tier real quick, and we can go to my lovely close-up. If you had to pick one filmmaker to explore, to be the only deep dive in a film history course, who would you choose? To me, to you, who would it be? Can't leave me hanging like that. Did you follow it up here? If you were to pick one director to use to explore film history, who would you pick? Instinctively, it'd be someone who spanned decades. Curious what you think. Okay. You caught me just after waxing poetic over Frank Capra for a while. Oh, it'd be Charlie Chaplin. Do a deep dive of Chaplin. If you're gonna do any, do him. For sure. Yeah. I think you explore a lot of film history that way. Charlie Chaplin would be my answer to that. I think you can learn a lot. And I think it's pure cinema too. Yeah, damn right. And all the ones ahead of it are masterpieces too. Lost Horizon is one of my favorite first time watches this year. It is so good. And like, what cut did you watch? Because that's another like Greed situation with Stroheim, right? And by the way, Capra was on set of Greed one day and saw Eric von Stroheim directing, and he's like, "That's who's considered a great director? Couldn't direct traffic." Capra was ridiculously funny and threw shade like no one's business. But I saw a cut of Lost Horizon that reminds me of Greed in the sense that like there's a lot of missing footage, so they use like stills, you know? And you're just like, wow, what the fuck? This is crazy. Because they still had the soundtrack. They still had like the dialogue for it. Everybody saw parodies of It's a Wonderful Life as a kid, whether or not you saw the movie. Like yeah, it's ingrained in our culture. It comes a point where a film gets so impactful that it becomes more than a film, right? It becomes a cultural artifact. I think that's true of most of Capra's work. Hitchcock got caught up in his own ego. He parodied himself as an actor. Yeah, he started to play into the bit for sure. I've been harsh on Hitchcock lately. I don't know. It's certainly a choice to be harsh on Hitchcock, but someone's got to be. I respect that, but To Live and Die in L.A. is my favorite Friedkin movie. I love that movie so much. I know what you meant. I mean, but even as an actor too, I would call him an actor in interviews. He was always so performative. I never bought a single thing that he did as authentic. So that kind of speaks against him. I saw the one with the stills. Yeah, and it was beautiful. Even with those, the beauty and mastery is apparent for sure. I have a nice Blu-ray of the film. Awesome. I couldn't. I think when I went looking for one, it was out of print. At least at the time, it wasn't affordable to get. I think I bought it on, like, Amazon, like, the video, uh, you know, I think I still have it there. I don't know, though. Hitchcock didn't like any of his disciples either. Well, that sounds like his problem, doesn't it? It's not our problem. We can watch De Palma and Polanski and be like, "This is how you do it better." Even Clouseau, right? Yeah, I don't have one at all. There's no Barnes& and Noble near me. They all went extinct. I don't think people in Florida know how to read anymore. So it's understandable why they got rid of the bookstore. But I had a blast doing this with you guys today. Hopefully, I provided some insight, and if not that, hopefully some entertainment. And definitely enjoyed spending time with you. Got to blather on about Frank Capra, which is one of my favorite pastimes on this channel.